Hey guys, so I can't believe I'm still having to make videos for this dead format, but unfortunately the ban list still isn't coming out, so as usual I still wanted to proceed with providing some of the best rogue decks in the current format based on Dueling Book data from YG School, but also based on some YCS level as well as regional level information from the past 4 weeks. And definitely, before we continue, go check out my sponsors as always, links and discount codes for Yu-Gi-Oh! Singles and sleeves all down below. So this is the overall meta tier list by the data video I provided last week. So for the purpose of this video, we'll just not include any decks that are in tier 1 or tier 2, although we'll also just sort of bump that Pearly into tier 2 as well. Salamangreat was kind of a surprise tier 2 deck, but you know what? It actually did have back-to-back YCS tops as well as some regional tops as well. So for now, we'll just put it there. So we're going to start with Branded Chimera. It actually did have a YCS top, turns out, in Colombia. I think last week when I was using my data sources, it didn't seem to identify Chimera, but you know what? I guess that was an error. So that's why I kind of jumped up here. It is definitely really solid. I think it's very good in terms of going first, at least. Very, very consistent. Being at the hand rip is always pretty nice too. And you don't really have as much like Tearlaments. You're not going to have the risk of, let's say, discarding like a Guido or a Kelbeck anymore. So that's always kind of nice. So, and Chimera, you know what? It's also pretty fairly budget to play as well for the most part. So I think while it has fallen back in terms of compared to Branded Despia at the very least, but you know what, post ban list, if for example Sanctifier most likely will get hit, that's not going to affect Chimera at all. You just have to kind of hope they don't hit Branded Fusion directly, because that does still affect this deck, because sometimes that's how you have to start your Chimera lines, with the Branded Fusion. So that's, I guess, kind of like the main concern if that were to happen, but for the most part, hopefully it just ends up being a Sanctifier ban and Branded Chimera just ends up pretty strong. So next we have Sprite, which, at the beginning of Phantom Nightmare format, this deck actually struggled quite hard in terms of getting like even regional level success. Lately, it's actually kind of caught up again. Of course, at the YCS level, still not doing too well, but at the same time, as a rogue option, and it's kind of weird to say that it's rogue, but I mean, it does have a lot of non-engine space, which admittedly is not too unique anymore. Most meta strategies nowadays sort of have the same concept, but you know what, it does have some capability of, let's say, for example, siding shifter if it has to. Of course, that might be something that might get banned, but at least in terms of direct Sprite hits, I don't think you would hit them anymore at this point. They've already gotten multiple hits throughout its lifespan since it came out a couple of years ago almost at this point. So I do think it's a solid option. It has can set up pretty impressive board still, going first, going second. The Mosquito TK line is very, very strong. It's just a matter of can you still get like your body sticking onto the board and try to combo going second. And then you have Tearlaments. This is, of course, another deck that came out in Power of the Elements, and also kind of weird to put it in Rogue again. But I do think this deck, among the 3 decks listed so far, it actually has, I think, the most promise in terms of it can be really, really explosive still. And lately, there's been some success with like the Paleozoic trap cards, which is always kind of nice. They do have that Needlebug Nest or whatever that can like mill 5, and it's not once per turn either, so it's actually pretty synergized as well with Tearlaments. They also have like some Toad lines available because of the Paleozoic stuff, which Tearlaments already had that line available anyways, and I do find it makes it like incredibly grindy. Like I find the games take forever against a Paleozoic variant, but you know what, I still think it's cool that they are finding ways to innovate them. I mean, I don't know too much about like the new Lightsworn support that's coming out in Legacy of Destruction. I'm assuming you can mix it up with Tearlaments, so kind of excited to see what that's going to unfold. So next we have Dragon Link, which is another deck that's kind of weird to say it's in Rogue, but you know what, it's a good old reliable. There's been through various times in the last 4 years, Dragon Link has been tier 1, tier 2 for so long. Brief stages, it would kind of come back down to Rogue. Let's say, for example, when Chaos Ruler got banned, like Halkify Rex got banned, but you know what, and then Bestial stuff came out and it sort of rose in terms of meta relevance again, and I am confident Dragon Link, it will happen again at some point. I was recently watching Jesse Cotton's Tenpai Dragon video, and he was actually showing off a variant with like Dragon Link stuff and the Tenpai stuff, so I'm sure that's something to look forward to at least, and as another variant, and again, I'm sure it will stay meta relevant for quite some time, even moving forward. So moving on to the next tier, we do have Vanquish Soul. This is, has had some pretty decent regional level success. It's another deck that can play Shifter, which of course is something that, you do have to be mindful of if this balance comes out. Who knows, maybe they actually finally hit Shifter, which kind of indirectly affects some as well. It's not that they're completely reliant on it, but of course in a format like right now with like Snake Eye, where Shifter is incredibly strong, then yeah, that is kind of one of the pieces that is, I guess, making Vanquish Soul at least a little bit relevant, at least at the Rogue level. So next we have Centurion, which is actually getting some more support in Legacy of Destruction. They're getting, for example, like a new synchro that can actually still place from even like the Banish Zone. So even if you bestial them, unlike like Legacia, they can at least still be able to put it in the Spell Trap Zone. They're getting another, or rather, they're getting a quick play. I believe it like can create a token as well to enable some more synchro plays. So I think that's really cool that they are getting some support already. You always expect that out of these like side sets, and Centurion, even right off the gate, was still pretty solid even with its initial wave of support, which is kind of hard to come by if you think about cards, or rather decks like Pearly, Rescue Ace, Mikanko. They, in their initial wave of support, they were not good at all, and then with the additional support, that's where they became like kind of meta relevant. So Centurion, you never know. I think you have to kind of respect them. The only thing that I am scared of is the Calamity lock. Of course, I don't think Konami would actually ban them, or rather ban that card right now, but I do think if Centurion were to somehow become tier 1 and Calamity is kind of prevalent, then yeah, I think at that point we can sort of hope that Konami will get rid of it. Next we have Rescue Ace. Really weird again to put this in Rogue, especially this low. It's interesting. It's not that the deck is that bad or anything. I just think that among the fire decks, if you're playing it, you might as well play Snake Eye. I do think that let's say if a lot of the Snake Eye cards actually get directly hit on this next ban list whenever it comes, maybe people actually flock back to Rescue Ace because it is quite strong. Any deck that can put up a combination of back row interruptions as well as monster interruptions, it's always, I think, to me quite strong and kind of hard to side against as well a lot of times. But I think Rescue Ace is kind of like on the back burner for now. Sure, maybe it's regional level wise, it's even struggling at that point, and especially so at YCS level, but I wouldn't count them out yet, at least depending on how this balance turns out. And then you also have Rika Sun Avalon, which lately has actually been getting some tops. You can definitely check out that deck profile I posted with Sam, who also finished, who topped the regional in Australia with Rika Sun Avalon, and he goes over a lot of really insightful, comments and theories in terms of how you would play this deck in this current format, and how it's like positioned probably pretty well post whenever Banlist comes out, because obviously I'm sure they won't get any further hits because they did get some crazy number of hits even though they were not a tier 1 strategy. And then you have Dinomorphia. This is another deck that's been pretty, at least in the last few weeks, has gotten, I guess I would say, surprisingly number of tops. But I guess, what, it does have some stun components to it. Like its main boss monster is basically Mystic Mine. And I did recently do a video on stun in general, like the rise of stun. So I guess in that kind of field, it's definitely getting some more tops and also doing pretty well in this current format. So next we have Phantom Knight. Unfortunately, there was no Dueling Book data to go with, but I still wanted to place this here manually just because it actually has several regional level tops. It's kind of sneaky because I feel like no one was really talking about it. And even though I'm only looking at the last 4 weeks, if you go back one more week before that, which was YCS Sydney, I believe it topped that as well. And so, you know what? You can never, I guess, count these guys out. They've definitely been kind of meta relevant a couple of years ago when, the whole Scythe lock was legal, as well as like DP, Verde, Anaconda, that shenanigans. So they don't really have that anymore. But I mean, again, it's kind of a deck that has a combination of back row removal in terms, or rather back row interruptions, like the Fog Blades, which serve as like monster negates. You also can't attack. And then they usually have some monster interruptions as well. So I think it's pretty cool that they are still somewhat having some competitive success even now. And then another rogue deck to watch out for is Raid Raptor. This is throughout this entire Phantom Nightmare format has had a few tops here and there. I think most of them are kind of just going away from the Kali Yuga lock, though, at least from the list that I've been seeing. But I think it is very scary. I sort of talked about this in my Branded Despia profile, because at a recent regional, they put out that 5300 attack tower, and I just have no way out to it when you're playing Branded Despia, at least at that high of attack. So I do think this deck is very scary. I mean, there are some hand traps that say Imperm can be quite strong against like Raider's Knight, but turns out Bestials can also be pretty strong against them, and Bestials are seeing actually pretty decent amount of play again, just because of something like getting rid of like the IP, or against Voiceless Voice is very strong. So that I think is something to watch out for, but as a rogue option, I think it's still actually pretty solid. So next we have Hero, which of course my good friend Miguel topped a regional a few weeks ago with this deck, so really cool to see. It has had a few tops, I would say, in the last few months. Hasn't been that consistent, pretty sporadic, but at the same time, I guess maybe more than you would expect, at least compared to maybe even like the year prior to that. But you know what, I think for now in the current format, I can only imagine Dark Law being able to banish one-sided macro Cosmos is pretty strong against Snake Eye, although I can also imagine their other win condition in Dark Angel in terms of kind of preventing spells. I can only imagine it's not that great, because you have some tier 1 strategies right now in terms of Snake Eye, like Voiceless Voice, they do have level 1s. They're probably playing Anima, maybe not all of them, but that's an easy way out to that. But nonetheless, still as a rogue option, really solid. So next we have Unchained, which of course fell really hard after that ban list, and you know, who knows, whenever this next ban list comes, would they put Red Dog maybe to 2 at least? I'm not sure. I do believe Yubel will also play some Unchained stuff post Legacy of Destruction. I don't actually really know the ratios for that deck in terms of the Unchained engine, so I can't speak too much on it, but I do think Unchained kind of got hit a little too hard. So next we have Sword Soul. There's not really too much I can ever really say about this deck. It's kind of as most plain vanilla as it gets. The only thing I can ever really say is that it is very, very budget. Usually the most budget out of the decks that are listed here. And you know what? Every now and then still get some regional tops too. Sometimes they play Shifter, especially in a format like, you know, right now, or like Tier 0 Tearlaments format. But it's not really ideal for them. So I don't think most lists play them, but I could be wrong. At least in terms of topping lists, I know at least one of them was main decking Shifter even. But you know what? It's super consistent. So if that's kind of like your preference and you want to play on a budget, Sword Souls might be a choice for you. And then you have Dark Roll. This deck, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you win the die roll, your opponent doesn't have Droll, you're probably winning that game. And to be honest with you, I think main deck play of Droll has probably come down a lot since the beginning of Phantom Nightmare format. That's my guess. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out. Obviously, post ban list, whatever hits may happen, as well as post Legacy of Destruction. Certainly let me know in the comments what you think will be the best hand traps for post Legacy of Destruction. I'm guessing Ghost Ogre will actually come back just because of the Tempai Dragon stuff. But you know what, for Dark World, as long as Droll's not, or Shifter really, and you know what, if Shifter gets banned, I guess that's good news for Dark World too. So I think this deck is super scary if it gets to go first. Really not a fun deck to play against, but you know what, at regional level, you kind of see like a random top here and there for the last year or so. So next we have Marincess, which of course always seems to get like a regional top every format. You know, it's funny, at one point kind of earlier in the format, a lot of people were saying maybe Zealantis should get banned, and you know what, who knows, maybe it's still up for contention, but I think that was probably more likely if the ban list had come out a little bit earlier, just because of how dominant rather Snake Guy was. Just kind of like how Tier 0 format, they ended up releasing a ban list like 2 months in to the format. But nowadays, you know, we haven't seen that, right? We've already been like playing this format for like 3 months now. I'm guessing they're just going to make a more proper hit to like a bunch of Snake Guy related directly rather than some of the indirect cards like, let's say, Linkuriboh, Zealantis. So I guess Marincess players will probably feel a little safe. And then you have Orcus. This, of course, has fallen a lot since, you know, even January ban list, where there was kind of that initial hype with Harpour coming back. And especially moving forward in the next format, I do think, I'm hoping at least, Runic gets hit a little bit further. Not only because it's just good, but there's also been a lot of Runic stun lately, which also is not really, I don't think, very healthy either. And just being able to draw so much, I don't think Konami is really traditionally like that. And Orcus and Runic have gone quite well together. Not always. Sometimes they don't even play that. Let's say they just focus on like the horror stuff, so at least that part of the Orcus deck will still be alive, but I think this has been quite on the decline since I guess post Phantom Nightmare format. And then we have Yubel. This also did not have any Dueling Book data, unfortunately, so I couldn't actually get a proper score, but I just wanted to manually put it here because it did actually top in the last 4 weeks. Michael, actually, you can check his video out on Team Sam's channel, so I think really cool that this deck was able to top even with its current wave of support, because it is about to get better, much better post Legacy of Destruction. They, of course, they're getting a few new cards. They're getting like a field spell, get some like you know, being able to search and get some recursion there. They have a new main deck monster that can, I think, special summon and destroy another card, and then they're also getting like a new fusion where you can kind of like summon, I guess, by just shuffling back things back to your deck or whatever, and I can kind of switch a monster's effect into just destroying like a Yubel monster. So I think it's really cool that kind of these like old legacy cards are getting more support and actually becoming meta relevant. I know in the OCG this deck is definitely meta relevant, so I'm kind of excited to see what's going to happen post Legacy Destruction with, you know, something like this. Voices getting more support, and of course Tempai Dragon is going to make a dent in our format. And then moving on to the final tier, we do have Exorcister. This, of course, is a deck that can play Shifter as well, and it's kind of part of the reason why it sort of stays relevant in a format like this, where Shifter is very strong against something like, you know, Snake Eye. It was also very popular during Tier 0 Tearlaments format, so if Shifter were to get banned, then yeah, I think that would probably cause a hit in terms of play of Exorcister, but at the same time, who knows, maybe this deck will still stick around and show that it's more than just Shifter. And then lastly, I just wanted to throw Goblin Biker on here as well, just because, you know, we're trying to do more so a recap of like Phantom Nightmare format. This is one of the new archetypes that came out of that set, and from my best knowledge, it only has one regional top during this entire format, which was actually I had showcased it on my channel. Marin, who finished top 4 with this deck. It's like rank 3 spam, I believe. Of course, I'm not like the most knowledgeable on this deck, but I do think that it's cool that it was able to get some kind of competitive success, and I'm sure there will be, who knows, some additional, at least indirect support, because it is rank 3 based in the future, and I'm kind of excited to see what will happen with this deck moving forward. Anyways, guys, that was it for a quick overview of some of the top rogue decks and most represented rogue decks in the current format. Again, a lot of it will probably change once this ban list, whenever it comes out, and even if it doesn't, it will change anyways with Legacy of Destruction. So definitely curious to hear your thoughts on terms of, you know, what rogue decks you're excited to play as we move forward into the new format. So anyways, huge thanks to all of you for watching. Big thanks to my patrons and sponsors as always, and well, take care, guys.